Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
Missing out on family time because of all the noise? Enjoy the moment without straining to keep up with the conversation.
Wow, what a beautiful sunset.
Discover Nuance Audio, the new invisible hearing solution that's built into your glasses. Discreet, comfortable, and easy to use. Nuance Audio glasses help you hear better and reduce background noise, so you can get back to enjoying time with your loved ones. Find a store near you at nuanceaudio.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, the chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party, the vice chair of the state Republican Party here in New York State, Jesse Garcia. And joining Jesse and me is our friend, Eric Levine, noted political commentator, essayist, TV star now.
Oh, please.
We've being on our show leads him to all kinds of network presentations now. And we have
Your
to now
Honor,
fight.
I think we should be getting our commissions as his agent.
Exactly, and we have to fight to get his time.
As soon as I get paid, you can have a third of it.
All right, good luck with that.
Exactly.
Sounds like Bidenomics.
Yeah. Apparently, you get what you pay for.
Well,
that's why I'm on the show.
You're going to get a Milky Way, but it's a smaller Milky Way, as the president would say. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So this is what I want to talk about today, give our audience an understanding where we're going to go. The first thing we're going to try to do is try and get a hold of Robert Silbering. Bob Silbering is a good friend of mine for decades and decades and decades. He was the special narcotics prosecutor for the city of New York, and he has a new book out which is called Law and Disorder, which is his reflections being a kid from the Bronx, becoming probably the drug czar for New York as well as for the country. We'll talk to him a little bit about the drug crisis in the country. Then I want to move on, gentlemen. I want to talk about the attack on American institutions and its values and practices. And there's some great lessons to be learned from Victor Davis Hanson, who's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. And then I want to follow that up by America at the Crossroads. And by that I mean we have a 2024 election. And I know people often say this, it's become a cliche. But I really believe, Jesse and Eric, this is the most important election in our lifetime. We have domestic turmoil, we have foreign threats, and we have a loss in this country of common shared values, and we're really exposed, and we'll have to be talking about that as well. And as soon as our producer Ava can get Bob on, we'll start that conversation with Bob Silbering. So let me just say about Silbering, he's a remarkable guy. There've only been in the history of New York 3 special narcotics prosecutors. The first was Sterling Johnson, who went on to the federal bench, and Bob was the chief assistant to Sterling Johnson. Then when Johnson went on the bench, Bob became the special narcotics prosecutor himself, and his chief assistant then went on as a third, Bridget Brennan, to become New York City's special narcotics prosecutor. Bob had jurisdiction with respect to the entire city, all 5 boroughs or counties, and he dealt with city, state, and federal officers, and he is a genius on this. He's just written this new book called Law and Disorder, and we're going to be very happy to have him on.
Richard, how are you today?
Bob, welcome aboard. Let the Record Show. In the studio with us is Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the vice chair of the state Republican Party and the county chair of Suffolk County Party, and a great political expert and public policy expert. Also with us today is Eric Levine, a noted attorney, political commentator, and essayist. You're our first guest in today's show, Bob. I've been talking to the audience about your background. You were the special narcotics prosecutor for the city of New York with jurisdiction over all 5 boroughs or counties, and that made you interface with all the DAs, state figures, and federal law enforcement figures as well. And what I want to ask you, and you have this great book out, which is now a bestseller called Law and Disorder, which is your reflection as a little kid from the Bronx becoming this great drug czar. So the first question I have for you, Bob, my good friend of how many decades I don't want to admit on the radio.
Oh, Richard, we don't want to tell people how long we know.
That's right, forever, at least 40 years, I think, Bob. But other than that, who's counting? The first question I want to ask you is, why did you think it was the right time to write this book?
Well, first of all, it was the pandemic, and I now had time to reflect on everything. And people have told me for years since I left the prosecutor's office that I should write a book because of all the people I know, all the people I dealt with, and all the cases that I did. But also, there was a second reason, and that is what I see now is that we're going back to the bad old days of the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, where we had rampant crime in the city, graffiti, drug gangs, shootings on the streets, drive-by shootings. And I see that now in New York. I see it in Chicago and California and the rest of the country. And frankly, it makes me worry that we are headed back to the bad old days.
I want to say to you, I think it's worse today, and let me tell you why. Then I'll let Jesse and Eric talk to you.
Yeah.
I think it's worse for a couple of reasons. One, I think the institutional forces that were in play when you and I were younger, when Speaker Vallone and I, for example, did Safe Street, Safe City during the Dinkins administration to get the cops on the street. I think you don't have the institutional commitment and the common sense people in the city council in New York, the state legislature up in Albany, leadership in the executive chambers. I think that's a real problem. You have
you know something? I agree with you. They've never had a speaker like Peter Vallone, and the council's never been the same since he left. And you know, you were his consigliere, I could say at the time, and common sense things were done then. Now, some of the things that are being passed are ridiculous.
And then the other thing that's troubling to me is you have a federal administration, a Biden administration, doesn't believe in protecting our borders, Bob. And as a result of that, we have a fentanyl crisis, which is costing us about 100,000 people a year. And this fentanyl crisis seems to me uniquely different than anything we've faced before. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly. I mean, I write in the book about fentanyl that, you know, it's become it's the new crack of the 80s, but it's more deadly than crack. And, you know, there are cases coming back that I've spoken to people about where you actually find someone with a needle in their arm because they're injecting it and the fentanyl is killing them. So it's really the biggest problem. And I've spoke to my successor, Bridget Brennan, about it, and we both are in agreement that this is really, you know, a terrible thing that's happening in our country with fentanyl. And you're right, a lot of it is just coming over the border, and it's being brought in by people who should never be crossing our border, illegal aliens. So it's a big problem. There's no question about it.
Jesse.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much. And, I mean, I was reading your history about how during your tenure in the Special Prosecutor's Office for in narcotics, that you led the nation in the number of court-authorized narcotic searches and wire-type orders. And, you know, I was wondering, other than the politics, what do you see different? I mean, every generation, I'm sure you faced it during that time period that everyone thought, okay, the sky is falling, we're never going to be able to bounce back, but you did. You were able to do that. A lot of that is we're feeling that same feeling now, a feeling of hopelessness of ever getting back to law and order, safer streets. Do you see that being the case? And if you don't, what is the path to get back to that?
Well, Jesse, I think you raised a really good point. You know, when I was there, we had really 5 great DAs. You had Morgenthau, Brown, Hines, and so forth. And I think you had more committed and conservative judges than you have now. And when, things were terrible, Rudy came in and he brought Bill Bratton in as the police commissioner. And they had the broken windows theory. And also they put a tremendous amount of cops in narcotics. And we just cleaned up the streets. And we saw, for example, when I started in special narcotics, there were 2,400 indictments in 1984. In 1995, we had 7,000 indictments. So people were being arrested, the streets were being cleaned, the drug gangs were being dismantled, and things were changed. I think now what's happened is that you have a lot of these progressive DAs, as you have Bragg in New York, you had Bodine in California, who they threw out on a recall. And what's happening is, for example, you see all these flash mobs of kids going into stores in Philadelphia, in California, in Chicago, and they have no fear of being punished because of the progressive DAs. They know that even if they're arrested, they're going to be back on the street, which is crazy. I think we really have to tighten things up, and judges have to get serious, and prosecutors have to get serious that they're not social workers and that they're really prosecutors, and they have to deal with people and punish serious offenders.
Eric.
Yeah, so thank you for being with us. I mean, this is really very insightful. So we know the raw materials for the fentanyl comes from China, and then we know that the fentanyl is processed in Latin and South America.
And in Mexico, yeah.
Part of Latin America, yeah, in Mexico. And then the cartels ship it across the border. So short of sealing the border and not letting anybody in, which, of course, even with the strictest immigration policies, it's never bulletproof. The question is, what, if anything, do we do extraterritoriality? Do we do something? Do we attack in Mexico? What do we do with China? How do we deal with the foreign import of the fentanyl into the United States?
Well, I think one of the first and most important things is to seal the border. And that's to keep a lot of these guys out and who are bringing it in. I think we need more Border Patrol people so that when these tunnels are dug, which happens, I mean, they found some huge tunnels coming from Mexico across the border. We need more DEA agents. And, we need a commitment to deal with this issue. I mean, Biden has been there now for 4 years. I don't think he said more than a few words about what's going on. And we have to really educate the public and our kids about the dangers not only of fentanyl, but of opioids and of cocaine and so forth.
By the way, isn't marijuana more deadly today and more dangerous today than it was in the old days?
It's stronger. Yes, it's stronger. And in some cases, it's addictive. So you're right. I mean, I write at the end of my book that we really have to have a national commitment to deal with these issues. It's education, it's rehabilitation, it's drug enforcement. There's never really been a war on drugs. I write in the book that the closest thing we had to a war on drugs is Nancy Reagan saying, just say no. And, the present administration hasn't taken this seriously at all. And we see what's happened in the last few years with fentanyl, the opioid crisis. I mean, this country's in a terrible state. You have hundreds of people dying every day because of overdoses and fentanyl.
There's roughly, I think last year there was roughly 100,000 deaths from fentanyl, which is two Vietnams. But talking about the war on drugs, we know who the cartels are. We know where the cartels are. We know where the processing plants are. Would you advocate for military action against the cartels and destroying the processing plants?
Well, that's a tricky issue because now you have to go into Mexico, and it seems to me, by the way, that the present president of Mexico has not been very helpful in dealing with this issue.
No, Obrador's in bed with the cartels.
Yeah, that's sure what it seems like to me. But that to me is a dangerous situation now where you're going to go in and attack Mexico and invade Mexico.
Well, you don't have to invade. You just drop a couple of bombs on the processing plants. You know, look, if Mexico were launching rockets into the United States, killing 100,000 Americans, what would our response be?
Well, certainly something to be thought of. I think if Trump is elected president, he may take that position. Biden will certainly not take that position.
Jesse, final thoughts with Bob.
Just carrying on that, we know we've been discussing the border. Other than what tools can locally we use, prosecutors decide to change? I mean, certainly the prosecutors you just enumerated that you worked side by side with, those were giants, especially compared to the Alvin Braggs and the ones we have that are sitting there now. But what if there is an enterprise? What if there is somewhere in that DA's office an enterprising assistant DA that wants to really make a change? How do you see them going about their job? You know, in theory, to try and attack this issue.
Well, you know, thank God that we do have special narcotics, and Bridget Brennan is doing a great job, and they're doing a lot of wiretaps. You're getting very little help from the other DAs. Frankly, exactly. They don't have the resources or the knowledge or the experience to deal with it. And really what I always did, and I said it in the book, was you got to really work with the DEA. You have to give the DEA more personnel. You have to give the DEA more powers, not only in the U.S., but give them more people outside the U.S. You need a lot of undercover operations. And it's those undercover operations and informants and surveillance that lead to wiretaps, and it's the wiretaps that give us not only the information we need, but the ability to take down these organizations.
Well, Bob Sobering, former special narcotics prosecutor for the city of New York, a major figure in New York City, New York State, the country, in fact, internationally. You worked with everybody. You have a great new book. It's been well reviewed, Bob. It's a bestseller. I just happened to be doing research on it, and I saw a picture of you standing next to former Governor George Pataki. Yeah. And I said,
he was a very young man at the time.
No, a recent picture, helped promoting the book. And I said, wow, if Governor Pataki, who sits with us in Cass and Cosby frequently on our night show, if Pataki likes Sobering's book, it's got to be a great book because he's a brilliant guy and a sharp critic. So, Bob Sobering, I want to say how wonderful it is to chat with you again. You still owe me lunch. Remember that. Don't forget that. You still owe me.
I do, and we have a secret that we can't reveal about what our last lunch. So,
well, Bob, thank you.
Sounds like a fine family gathering.
That's right.
You and Jesse and.
That's what we'll bring in. We'll bring it. I'll tell you what. You'll come in. You'll take Jesse, Eric, and me out. How's that? Is that a deal?
That's okay. and I want to thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the book. Again, it's Law and Disorder: How a Kid from the Bronx Became America's Top Drug Prosecutor. It is really a typical Al Hiss story about, how I came from nowhere and went right to the top, and all the wonderful things we did and the cases that we made, and how the city, changed and became great for 20 years after, Rudy came in and Bratton came in and the city was cleaned up.
It can be done. Now. Bob, that's the whole problem. It breaks your heart because we know what to do, but there's not the willingness of the political types to do it, and that's the crime. Bob Sobering?
I think we may have to go back to, stop and frisk.
Absolutely.
And you got to put more of the, guys on the street, and not only that, the anti-crime cops out there. And we're getting to a bad spot, and we got to turn it around.
Well, Bob, we're going to bring you back. We're going to see what happens in the months ahead, and you can give us an update. Because I know you still have very good communications in that world. Let us know.
Yes. Okay.
Thanks
Richard,
again.
Jesse, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was
take care
terrific.
and be well. Bye.
Thank you. This is Let the Record Show. We've just been talking to Bob Sobering, a friend of mine and a great public servant for over 40 years. He was the special narcotics prosecutor for the whole city of New York. He was a city, state, national, in fact, international figure in law enforcement, fighting the drug cartels and the scourge. He has a great new book, Law and Disorder, and we'll be taking a break with Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the state Republican Party, county chair of Suffolk Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50. Code listen50. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Hulu, presenting Paradise. Paradise is Hulu's critically acclaimed addictive drama series, starring Sterling K. Brown, Julianne Nicholson, and James Marsden. The Daily Beast calls Paradise your next TV obsession, and the New York Times says it's exhilarating in all the right ways. Paradise is for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. For more information, visit fyc.hulu.com.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros. Word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted essayist, commentator, and attorney. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, gentlemen, this is what I want to talk about in this segment. I want to talk about the attack on American institutions, the values, our practices, and there are certain lessons that come from Victor Davis Hanson, who is a PhD from Stanford. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. He had a remarkable piece the other day in the New York Post. And I want to be fair here. The name of his article is called 20 New Rules of Politics Democrats Have Given Us. And I would say to you, these are rules of politics. It may have been generated by Democrats, but the question is we have to hold the Republicans accountable as well. So I want to go through this with you, gentlemen, and I'll tell you what troubles me most of all. And there's a whole list of these 20 items, and we can talk about as many of these as we can. But the one that troubles me most of all is it, and this is kind of a generic comment, there is no respect for our values, our institutions, and institutional practices. Everything is fair game to get your man. It's almost Stalinistic the way Beria, who's the chief of security for Stalin, said, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. You've had the weaponization of the criminal justice system, and in fact the civil legal system as well here in New York, with a very troubling case brought by the state attorney general of this state against Donald Trump. And it's a case, by the way, whether it's against Trump or anybody else, I think is a threat to the economic viability of the state of New York, where people may not want to stay here and come in here and do business. But so the first issue I want us to talk about is the politicalization of criminal justice system, the weaponization of that system. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime, and using all these practices of disregarding due process, coming up with trumped-up charges, elevating misdemeanors to felonies, creating violations of law where there's no injury. I want to talk about that first. And then the second issue I want to talk about, which really troubles me, is the threat, and this is in Eric's bailiwick, the threat of having the Democrats control all three branches of government, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. that it's very important the Republicans hold on to the Senate because the Democrats will abolish the filibuster, and without the filibuster, there's no check against the ruthlessness and the ambition of the radical left in the Democratic Party. So, Jesse, why don't you start us off? What's your thoughts about all these cases against Trump, and where are we going with that?
Well, I think it's very clear that, the attacks upon American institutions lies solely in the hands of the Democrats. They are the ones that have weaponized these institutions. They're the ones who demoralize these institutions. They demonize these institutions. They invoke violence against these institutions, and they cast doubt on these institutions, but they don't agree in their way. One of the hopes I had just recently is the 9-0, a unanimous vote by the U.S. Supreme Court. A court that's split politically in ideology, I should say, and more than politically, where they said that reinstated Donald Trump to the ballot in Colorado, Illinois, Maine, and prevented that from happening in other states. Because that's what we need is the demonstration of integrity, fairness, transparency, and the rule of law by adults. Right now, the Democrats are the ones that are waging this war. The people will have less support and trust in their government by how their leaders act. And I don't think that anybody could argue with the fact that the way that the AOCs of the world have acted, the ways that the local prosecutors like Bragg have acted, the way the president has acted, the way Mayorkas has acted, and the Attorney General Garland has acted. These are institutions, and there are a host of minions that have attacked for political purposes. And I got to tell you, on the Suffolk County Republican Party website and the Brookhaven Town Republican Party website and social media, this story that you referred to on how the Democrats have attacked the institutions and changed the way politics is done is posted on the night of the State of the Union as a reminder to our voters, our residents, and those who may tune in, what they have done to suppress the vote, to attack democracy, and to attack this republic and its institutions that we've held so dear. So fervently since their ascension to power. They have a take no prisoners approach. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about the Constitution. And I do know that our party, the Republican Party, stands for that. And you know what? One of the issues that we have as well is that these Democrats, and I know I'm a little bit on the soapbox here, they have partners. They have partners in the mainstream media, which, unbeknownst to themselves, as they attack the First Amendment, they're attacking themselves by the way they're attacking their own credibility as they approach things. And, of course, big tech that has been in partnership with the Democratic Party, the elitists of this country, to suppress the voices of the minority, to suppress the voices of conservatives. And like I said, last week, we discussed about, an IDF member speaking on Berkeley. That's wrong. If someone who is a support of Hamas wanted to speak, we need to let them speak. That's what this is about. Because in those discussions, that debate is where we have consensus. So that's what I'm saying. That's where it's squarely. You want to see where the people don't trust their government or their institutions anymore? Watch their leaders. Watch their elected leaders. Watch the president. Watch governors. Watch senators and lawmakers. See how they act upon it. Utilize it for political partisan purposes. That's where trust is eroded amongst the people.
Yeah, so I agree with most of what you say, Jesse. I just don't think you go quite far enough.
Good.
but in fairness, the Democrats are not alone in trying to undermine our institutions. That's why January 6th was so offensive to those of us who believe in our institutions. The riot on the Hill on the Capitol on January 6th was designed to prevent the election from going through. That was a direct assault on our institutions. So we can't forget that. And you're going to see that in the election coming up, the replays of the rioters on the Capitol just being played over and over and over again, and talking about Donald Trump's role in that as he sat there knowing it was going on, people chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence," and he did nothing. So the Democrats aren't alone in this. But I agree with you in everything you describe in terms of the Democrats. But what motivates the Democrats in terms of attacking our institutions? Our institutions are rooted in the Constitution. From the progressive left's perspective, what is the Constitution? The Constitution is a vestige of white supremacy. It was written by a bunch of old white guys based on the Enlightenment, who were a bunch of old white guys, who crafted out the American experiment. And since the American experiment was just written by a bunch of old white guys for white privilege, unwinding it or ignoring it or trying to undo it is a just cause. And that is in large part what motivates them. And what would happen, I think, to me, the worst outcome of the election in November would be Joe Biden wins, Chuck Schumer remains leader of the Senate, and Hakeem Jeffries becomes Speaker, because now the Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and the House. And what can they do with that? At that point, kiss the filibuster goodbye. And the Republicans will be in the minority and probably be in the minority.
And what's so dangerous about having the filibuster gone?
Because at that point, the Democrats will make D.C. a state that will guarantee 2 more Democratic senators, making it virtually impossible for the Republicans to ever retake the Senate. They will pack the court. There will no longer be 9 justices on the Supreme Court. They will demand that the president nominate as many liberal judges as they can to be approved by the Senate until such time as the progressive wing of the court has the majority. So we will no longer have 9 justices. And they will change the election laws, as Nancy Pelosi attempted to do with H.R. 1 in the last House that she was Speaker for, and would make it virtually impossible again for Republicans to ever be elected. It would completely unwind our system. We would become a one-party country. It would slowly turn into an authoritarian state. And we can't have that. We need 2 strong parties. We're always our strongest when we have a strong center left and a strong center right, battling it out for votes amongst the American center. But unfortunately, our parties have become extreme in many respects, and the extremes of the parties, even though they're not the majority of their particular party, control the day. Look what's going on in the Republican House today. You have people like Matt Gaetz, Bob Good, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Rosendale, some of the worst people in the House, because there's such a thin majority, Republican majority in the House, directing or causing the House to do absolutely nothing. They forced out Kevin McCarthy, and now they're refusing to allow any legislation to be passed under the threat for Speaker Johnson that if he were to go down a road that they don't like, they'd vacate the chair with him. And then on the left, you have an ascendant progressive wing of the party. Joe Biden's policies are designed to appease the left. What we're seeing now with his distancing himself from Israel is a perfect example of that. He's worried about the Dearborn effect, which is he believes that he needs Michigan to be reelected. You have a small area in a suburb outside of Detroit, Dearborn, Michigan, which has an Arab Muslim community that is pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, and he believes he needs that in Michigan to win re-election. And as a way to, you are seeing the United States distancing themselves from Israel in their war against Hamas. And that can't happen. But coming back to the original point, for the left, it's all justified. What they're really doing is fighting white supremacy and white privilege. It's all part of this social justice construct. And that is really the danger, and that's kind of what you're seeing at play. But that's why the institutions are so critical. And just to make my point again, and that is why, for Nikki Haley voters like myself, January 6th was such a big part of why we supported Nikki Haley and why we would have such trouble voting for Donald Trump in the fall. We're not voting for Joe Biden under no circumstances. But January 6th, Jesse, to your point about how we need our institutions to hold, it is specifically because January 6th was an assault on those institutions that we're so troubled.
Let me say this, 2 points. Number one, the double standard that's been posited by the media, by the Democratic Party, by various institutions, by tech, as Jesse points out, is awful. So, yes, Eric has a point about January 6th, and nobody wants to have a riot at the Capitol, but you shouldn't have the leader of the Senate majority ranting in front of the Supreme Court of the United States and calling out Supreme Court judges by name, and then all of a sudden you have a madman went to one of the judges' houses and with loaded gun.
Nobody would ever defend Chuck Schumer.
Okay, but what I'm saying is because words have consequences, and that was irresponsible of Schumer, and you can't be surprised that some lunatic will then take up on that, thinking he's saving whatever his values are. So that was a threat to our institutions because you're attacking the judges and governmental officials. The same way, for example, when Trump was president, you had people like that congresswoman who made herself very rich, she and her husband, California, by all kinds of deals over the years, starts off poor and winds up rich. And she's ranting and raving wherever you see a cabinet member or an official of the Trump administration in a restaurant, go after them, confront them. Those are terrible things. And let's not forget, and I mean this sincerely, let us not forget how awful it is that the streets were rioting in the summer before the election. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, violence, people died, people burned down buildings, caused billions of dollars of damage. They threatened federal courthouses. They were all from the left, and the Democratic Party said nothing. They kept saying there was just peaceful demonstrations. Well, let me tell you something. January 6th was awful. The riots of the summer and the fall were designed to intimidate people, figuring that if you reelect Trump, you're going to have a civil war, but Biden would bring back calm and peace and normalcy and will be a uniting figure in this country. Joe Biden has not been a unifying figure. He's been a divisive figure. He stands for one political party's control and taking the knee to the most extreme faction of that party. We need countervailing forces against the extremists in both parties. The Marjorie Taylor Greene clowns on one side and the Tlaib characters, the AOC characters on the other side. We need institutions to protect us against the extremes. And if anybody understands the history of this country and read the Federalist Papers, it's all about protecting minorities against majority tyranny, about having countervailing forces, having checks and balances, having reasonable common sense movement to the center, and making us one common society with common shared values, that the institutions and the survival of this country is more important than winning on any one particular issue. We'll take a break at this point. We'll be back to keep up this conversation with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us.
This is Let the Record Show.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Number 3030.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves.
Just a little further. You got this.
That we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back now with Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney. So, gentlemen, we were having the conversation about Dr. Hanson's article. If there's anything either one of you want to raise in that discussion about the threat to our institutions, our values, our practices, I'm happy to do that. If not...
Yeah, I'd like to make just one quick point. So talking about putting together these prosecutions of Donald Trump by Alvin Bragg and Letitia James, and I agree with you 100%. These are Stalinist types of prosecutions. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Letitia James actually running on, I will get Donald Trump. That's Soviet-style justice. But putting that together with another thing that the Democrats currently want to do to the tax code, they want to tax unrealized gains. So people have to declare what their house is worth, what their painting is worth, what their statue is worth. Things, things that they haven't sold, but they hold on to and may appreciate.
You buy a stock for $10. Right. You get lucky, it goes up to 17. They're going to make you pay on the 17, even though you haven't gotten out of the stock and sold it.
Right, but this is a slightly different point because on the stock you can point to something that's the value. Here's the concern. Somebody comes to your house, the IRS agent comes to your house and says, "How much is that painting worth?" And you say, "I think that painting's worth $10,000." And the IRS agent says, "You know what? We think it's worth $100,000. And it just turns out that the IRS agent is a Democrat, and the guy who owns the painting is a high-profile Republican who they don't like. And all of a sudden now they're charged with tax fraud. They can criminalize the tax code simply because somebody in a good faith effort to value something is accused of a crime just to get them. And this isn't far-fetched because we know that the criminal justice system has been weaponized. So putting aside the fact that taxing unrealized gains, I believe, is unconstitutional, and hopefully the Supreme Court will find as such, the danger of that is because it gives the tax authorities unbelievable power to just subjectively decide that they want to criminally prosecute someone they don't like because they deem something to be worth more than the taxpayer.
Oh, and in that regard, Jesse and Eric, you remember there was this woman named Lerner, who is a high-level IRS person, who shut down conservative voices and Republican voices using the IRS
conservative
authority.
and pro-Israeli voices.
It's absolutely outrageous, and she got away with it. She absolutely got away with it, and nobody said anything about it. It was outrageous. So Eric is right. They can tax you to death, okay, to get revenues for their far crazy programs. They can weaponize it to prosecute for tax fraud or underreporting, whatever they want to call it. And they can shut down a countervailing voice. And part of the great leap forward by the Biden administration is, 83, 85, 87,000 more IRS agents. They have to justify their existence, gentlemen. They have to do something. Me, I get rid of all those people, and I got 87,000 more people at the border to protect our border against this invasion. How's that? So let's switch, Jesse, unless you want to add to that. I want to talk about America at the crossroads.
The only thing I want to add to this is that, I believe it was Ronald Reagan who said the Democrats, they didn't want to tax anything that moves. The other thing I want to just touch upon from that list that's for me is scary is because is what we've been watching is the targeted prosecution of individuals. I do not understand how 2 or 3 years after the riots at the Capitol, using facial recognition and other technology, that we can continue to arrest people for engaging in that riot. Yet, in countless riots and the destruction of our cities, our police departments, our fire departments, in the summer of 2020, that we have not seen any very similar prosecutions.
We haven't seen anything similar. Jesse, we haven't seen anything.
It's not a matter that we can't do it. It's just that we don't want to. It's crazy.
Exactly. And, I think that one of the problems that we're going to have, the president's going to have here, is on immigration, but it is not mentioning at all the name of that young lady that was killed by an illegal migrant that came from New York down. I mean, he's not going to mention it anytime this past week. And yet, Floyd was mentioned by him and Democrats countless times over and over again. There is no difference. So you can almost see that it's our current elected leaders with their pals and cohorts in the mainstream media. They are the one that's fueling the divide in this country. And that is the most disappointing thing and the most scariest thing for me as a Republican, as an American.
Well, that comes back to Richard's point that he made before. Joe Biden and this administration is probably the single most divisive, and that includes Trump, single most divisive in history. Remember, this is Joe Biden running around calling people semi-fascists, whatever that is. Everybody, the Georgia voting law, which turns out more people voted in Georgia history than ever. He calls to Jim Crow Part 2. Joe Biden is not a nice guy. He just simply isn't.
How about his line when he was running for president the first time, saying the Democratic Party stands for African Americans and the Republicans want to put you back in chains?
Right,
How about that one?
Yeah.
How about that one?
Yeah, so Joe Biden is a particularly divisive president. And there are voices on his party that are maybe more divisive than his, but the obligation is his to tell them to stop, and he won't.
So, which brings me to our final conversation topic, America at the Crossroads. I believe that the 2024 election really is the most important election in our lifetime. We have domestic turmoil. We have these foreign threats. We have foreign enemies who have incredible power and are united to try to bring us down. And we have the loss of common shared values. And the reason I'm deeply troubled, Jesse and Eric, about this is regardless which one of these two candidates wins in November, whether it's Trump or whether it's Biden, neither one of these people can unite this country. They cannot speak for the entire country. And that's a very dangerous place to be in. So, Jesse, let me begin with you. What are your thoughts about my comment that this is the most important election in our lifetime?
I think it truly is. And it's not hyperbole. America is at a crossroads. Listen, politicians and party leaders like myself say it every time. And last year I said it to our committee people because it was the most important local election we were going to have. This is truly the future of America. As Eric pointed out, the last thing we need is Biden in the White House, Schumer running the majority of the U.S. Senate, and Hakeem Jeffries as the House Speaker. That spells doom for this republic and the democracies that we know, for the policies we know and the Constitution which we have been born into and cherish so much. This is what's going to be important. That's why I believe that while these two front runners have flaws, the one thing that we do know is that there is more of an America first and a more of a freedom first, more of a liberty first agenda, and one that rewards entrepreneurialism and hard work in the side of the Republicans and Donald Trump than there is under the Biden administration. The Biden administration and his cohorts want to create a nanny state so that everyone is dependent upon their government. That's why their party is in shambles. Their party no longer represents working Americans anymore. They represent elitists, and they represent those in poverty. And that's why those two are in conflict, and that their coalitions are far more fragile than those of the Republican Party as we go forward. This is an important election. It's an important election from the top for the White House and right through every representative offices that comes forward.
Well, I'm not sure which party is more fragile. They're both pretty fragile. I'll just make this observation. In 1776, there were about 1.5 million colonists. And out of that 1.5 million colonists, we had George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, James Monroe, John Jay. Today, our choice is Donald Trump and Joe Biden. 335 million Americans, and our choice is Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's pretty frightening. I would couch it slightly differently, Richard. I happen to think, rather than saying it's the most important election of our time, I would say that America is facing the most important crossroads of its time since World War II. Not since the 1930s, 1920s, has the United States been facing a threat, an international threat. It used to be the Germans, the Japanese, and the Italians. Now it's the Chinese, the Russians, the Ukrainians, and North Korea. And the real question is, are we prepared to confront those dangers? And the answer is no. The answer is no. We don't have the military capability. The country is not united. To your point, Richard, I don't think either of these men can unite the country. Whoever wins, it's going to be by a hair's breadth, and the country will remain divided 50-50 roughly. We had an opportunity to nominate people who could be more unifying. Nikki Haley would have been far more unifying, but she was rejected by the Republican Party. I mean, that's how it works. You vote, you do it at the ballot box. So I'm quite troubled because I don't know that America is ready to face these dangers. We're at a low ebb in terms of our Navy, or low ebb in terms of our Air Force. We are not meeting recruitment goals, and should there be another dust up around the world, particularly in Taiwan, will we be capable and able to push back the Chinese? I don't know, and it's quite possible we can't. I mean, this administration's policies have been an unbelievable disaster internationally, starting with the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan, the unforgivable appeasement of Iran, the inability to forcefully stand up to Russia, and the inability to stand up to China. But let's be clear. The Republican isolationist wing of the party is all for American retreat. Their foreign policy is very much like that of the progressive left. It starts from a different place, but it ends up in the same point. Bring America home. We don't want to be part of the world. And that's a recipe for disaster. And I don't know that either Donald Trump or Joe Biden is for a muscular foreign policy and American exceptionalism and America's role in the world. That's an open question. So that's why I'm fearful.
Is it an open question? I'm sorry, Eric. I thought you were finished. Is it an open question? Because if you look at Donald Trump's foreign policy over his last 4 years, what he did in the Middle East, what he did in bringing NATO together monetarily and such as a unit, despite the fact that his language and maybe his thumbs were a bit crass, that the system worked.
Well,
China was in check. Taiwan wasn't in trouble. North Korea wasn't saber-rattling. Iran was on its heels. And the Middle East had the Accords. I'm sorry, the
Abraham Accords. Look, I agree with you.
Yeah, Abraham. So I don't know. I think if you compare policies, we've seen the track record of both these individuals, and I think that Donald Trump's is more in line with what you're saying we need.
Yeah, I'm with Jesse on this argument.
Okay.
To me, on a binary choice between Biden and Trump, if you love this country and if you care about having secure borders and national security, is a no-brainer.
Okay.
Or you can have 4 more years of Biden. Biden, by the way, is never going to make 4 more years. So you can have Harris, who's a bigger lightweight than Biden. And where's the border protection? Without a border, you don't have a country, gentlemen.
Trump did not rebuild the military in the way that he described it. We did. The military has gotten weaker. He is talking about leaving NATO. He talks very favorably about people like Putin. He's very clear he's going to sell out Ukraine. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was something that started on his watch. That was his plan. I agree with you 100% about the Abraham Accords in the Middle East. I think his record there was spectacular. Look, I do think Donald Trump's record on foreign policy is significantly better than Joe Biden's. My point is slightly different. Going forward, what's his plan? And it sounds like his plan is withdrawing from NATO, and NATO has always been the cornerstone of the American national security since the end of World War II, and it continues to be that today. I am raising the specter that it is a problem going forward, that the United States is not going to be ready, capable, and able to deal with the threats that face it, regardless of who's elected.
Let me make this final point, because we only have a little bit of time left. If you have any doubt in your mind about what the right thing to do is come November, just think about this. You have a trumped-up charge coming out of the Georgia local prosecutor named Fannie Willis, who is as corrupt could be, who put her boyfriend on the payroll, denied it, has perjured herself in testimony and in documents, and she went after Trump as a political agenda to build up her credibility with her Democratic Party friends. And you say, now, where are you getting this from, Judge? Where are you getting this from? Well, how about the fact that in February, before the August indictment of Trump and 18 other people on so-called RICO charges, which are all nonsense charges, by the way, and I'm telling you that as a matter of law. Guess who Fannie Willis met with at the White House? The Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Now, you want to tell me why a local prosecutor is meeting with the Vice President of the United States, and a number of months later, you have a Trump indictment? And if you have any doubt that that's just not, they weren't talking about giving money to cancer care, let me tell you this. She hires this guy, Wade, who knows nothing about criminal law or RICO cases, and he goes to the White House for 2 separate meetings, 8 hours and 8 hours, to meet with the White House staff. So what I'm telling you is the weaponization of the criminal justice system, the corruption at the local level, aided and abetted by this Biden White House, this cannot be tolerated. This has to be stopped and should be stopped now. Speaking of stop now, I've got the signal from the booth. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. Jesse, great show. Thank you very much. Eric, great show. Thank you very much. I wish you gentlemen well. I look forward to being back with our audience next week on Let the Record Show. Thanks again for listening, and God bless you, and God bless this great country.
Let the Record Show is on the air.